Okie doke. So here we are back with another installment of our live call examples. And right here, we are going to look at probably one of my absolute favorite hacks to the consultative sales process, and that is diagnosing. Now, those of you who have been in sales for quite a bit, or you have just become an expert, again, in your product offering, in your service, in your niche, in your whatever, you can do this pretty early in the discovery process. In this specific call with the business owner, we listened to a little bit of this one with Frame earlier in the previous modules, and this happens 5 minutes into the call. Because our salesperson, our business owner in this case, is such an expert in what he does, it's very easy for him early on to diagnose what's going on. And in this specific example, the prospect is actually seeking his validation, and I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to give this 5 stars because this guy is probably one of the best at diagnosing what's going on and doing it in a way that feels collaborative. And so it's kind of coachy. It's not what you're typically going to hear on a lot of sales calls. And again, you're probably not going to hear this from a very cold prospect. So be mindful of that. And in the previous installment with Discovery, know that we've got to have a conversation about what is the crux or core issue. What's the root cause of the problem? What's the bottleneck? What's the real issue and matter at hand? And if we don't have that discussion, then this doesn't happen. And once you're clear with your prospect of what the problem is, you can do this. You can start to say, well, I think that the main issue here is this. You can start to label and identify in very clear, plain language what the problem is. And then your prospect has the opportunity to agree with you. They either agree, they disagree, they have something to add. They're like, yeah, kind of. And so the better you get at this, the less that they will have to respond. They'll say, wow, that's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly right. You're right, whatever. And so the more that they do that, the more that you know you nailed it. And it's really a lot of fun to start doing this and sort of calling your shot. Now, we saw the salesperson in the last video with Discovery try to do that and wasn't really effective. So let's hear the nuances. Again, I'm giving this 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's very good. And let's get into it, shall we? So here we go. We're back with this call.
Things of that nature. So that's sort of what it looks like. And I think, so I guess first kind of like a quick check with you. Does it sound like I'm on track with, starting to get the niching to a better place, or am I still needing more?
Yeah. I mean, are you a Seinfeld fan by chance?
So we asked for validation around niche specifically because earlier in this call, about a minute or two prior, he was explicitly saying that, and we touched on this a little bit in the Frame video, where he's getting people who are asking, do you do this? Because his marketing message and his positioning isn't extremely clear to the market at large. So, he's going to pivot some things, and then he's asking for our approval. Are we on the right track? Now, instead of just saying, yep, looks good, sounds good, we're going to add value by actually building some more rapport with this Seinfeld reference. And then this metaphor is going to act as a really powerful place we can come back to in the close if we need to. So I love that our business owner does this. And let's hear the metaphor.
Yeah.
The wise words of Jerry Seinfeld, although this is in the context of ending a relationship. He says, ending a relationship's like knocking over a vending machine. You can't do it in one go. You got to rock it back and forth a few times. The same is true for finding your positioning, right? It's like knocking over a vending machine. It's gonna take a few kicks at the can. I appreciate your challenges in finding that.
So we got a little bit of rapport built, and we have a very easy to visualize representation of what it's like to really find niche. And this is going to put our prospect at ease. Instead of thinking that he's just going to get something one and done, because anything that we tell him from now on is either closer or farther away from rocking the niche thing back and forth. Now, if we would have said like, yep, you're on the right track, or yep, that sounds good, then we have more value to add. And if we tell him something that he doesn't necessarily like or isn't just really on board with, he's going to think that that's kind of an end-all be-all. Oh, that's the answer that they would have. When in reality, selecting a niche and finalizing and optimizing anything is going to take time. It's going to take reps. It's going to take back and forth. And so now we have that understanding that everything's not just so clear, black and white and binary, especially with some of these complex things. So you give yourself some grace by helping them think about the situation differently instead of saying yay or nay. Now, what we're going to go into next is classic diagnosing. This is what really the issue is. This is what if you don't fix this, you're going to have a problem, something like that, right? So I don't know exactly what we say here, but let's get into it.
That niche is very common. And, I'm looking at your notes here too, as well as listening to what you're saying. And I think you're right. I think, Series C tech is a good target, but we've got to pair that with a very clear and cogent articulation of problem and solution, right? That's kind of what's currently perhaps missing, but I think you have the makings of it. In the beginning, choosing a positioning strategy is about making decisions to focus, and then standing by those decisions to the extent that it's pragmatic and practical. And what I mean by that is really common scenario for us is client comes in and we get them really, really focused.
So what he just did over that last 40 seconds or so is to a T diagnosing. I think you're close. I think you've got a good idea. Series C tech, it's a good direction, but you have to very clearly present problem and solution to that market. Just because you can solve something for Series C tech doesn't mean that they know that you can. And so you need to identify the problem, because that's what's going to get their attention, and then keep them hooked in with how you will solve it, or how your system, or how you're different, or how you're going to help them solve it. And so what the business owner just did was he, for 30, 40 seconds, basically said, yes, you're on the right track, but if you don't look out for this, or if you can't achieve this, then it doesn't matter how good of your niche you are, or how good of a niche you have, if you can't communicate your expertise to them. Then what he's going to do is he's going to go into example of how they solve it, or we solve it in our business, to show that we practice what we preach. This is very cool. And many of you will probably do this already. And so this is a fine thing. This is a fine example to do this. It shows that you have a masterful understanding of what you teach, because you see it everywhere, right? You kind of can't help but see these problems and solve them in your own business, in your client's business, XYZ. So let's listen to this a little bit, and that's really it. The business owner is going to diagnose throughout this entire call, so we could listen to the rest of this 30-minute call, but I'll spare you for now.
Okay, here's the best market for you, and here's the best offer, and here's the best messaging, and here's the best positioning, and it's amazing. But then they get somebody that comes out, from outside that scope, comes to them and tries to give them money, right? And people have a hard time turning down money, right? And so we're okay with you taking on work that's outside of your perfect scope, if I can call it that, right? If the money is good and the project's interesting and you want to do it and you have capacity. Our goal is to get you to the point where that just doesn't make sense for you anymore, because you have enough in your pipeline of perfect scope clients that it just makes good sense to focus there and turn everything else down. That's where we want you to get to.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess the next piece that I'm sort of.
So what will happen with a sophisticated buyer, or an analytical buyer, or someone who just wasn't really clearly enrolled with the first sales pitch, like this situation, is that they'll basically just say, okay, got that. That's solved. Next thing that I'm struggling with, next thing that I don't understand, next thing I'm uncertain with. And so that's effectively what happens throughout the rest of this call, is we just repeat that cycle that just happened for 2 minutes over and over again. I'm not sure exactly how many times. And so all these different matters that are a concern in the prospect's mind, we're just going to take that off the table as an issue by showing them, yep, this is what we're going to do. This is how it normally looks, and this is where we'd like to get you to. And so, we use the knocking over a vending machine example for solving niche. Got it. That's clear. And, what it's going to look like is you'll get so good at, you'll need to get good at communicating the problem you solve and the solution you have to the marketplace so that you can keep attracting the right people. And, what will happen is you're so good at doing that is you'll attract people who are outside of your perfect scope, is what he says. And, some people, they take that money because money is funny and, money talks, all that kind of stuff, and it's good money. That's fine. You can do that. But the real goal, sir, is to get you to the point to where you're so profitable and successful, you have so much in your pipeline that you can actually turn that money down and not have to lose a wink of sleep over it. Right. And so that is a future pacing of the situation. And, he doesn't really respond the way that I would expect him to. But he's like, yeah, that sounds great. That's what I want to do. Now, just for giggles, let's see what else he comes up with next, because it might be the real problem that he wants to get solved. And that niching thing was just kind of a surface level facade. And he knew that we were going to get past it. And let's see what else is really there.
Churning around a little bit is where, because I did listen to a number of your videos, and, you were sort of saying it's good to kind of hone in, like if you're doing your LinkedIn profile, to hone into one thing so that people kind of tag onto that and they're like, okay, that's your thing. That's the entry point. Cause I have gotten that. I've had a couple good leads recently, and I kind of I like mapped out the whole enchilada, and they were like, okay. But I think I just sounded like a generalist to them, and they weren't clear on what I do specifically that is going to blow people's minds. So that was a miss. But I guess I talked to Zafar, and I'm trying to figure out, it's like, again, if you put a gun to my head and you were like, okay, you could only do one thing, it would probably be CEO coaching. But I do all of the, a number of different things, and especially the alignment piece, like with goal setting and OKRs, and even if you're installing that process into your organization.
So there it is. He doesn't actually want to do what he originally said he was doing. He wants to do something else. And so therein lies the real matter at hand. And so then we have to go through that next several phases in the call. And I remember this part now. So I gave you a clear example of what diagnosing looks like. And this is also a really good point to talk on too, is that when you diagnose and when you identify and label the issue, like I said earlier, they get to agree or disagree with you. And the beauty in that is that you won't go into a sales pitch wrong, selling them the wrong thing, focusing on the wrong thing. And if we had done that, let's say we didn't have the discussion around CEO coaching and pivoting from what he's been doing with tech people, because if CTO and CEO coaching is pretty different. They're still executives, but there's some corollaries around mindset and execution and how they show up as leaders. But the subject matter of what they're actually doing and what they influence is very different. And so if we would have gone into a presentation of how the 90-day pipeline in this example is going to help him be a better, tech expert and blah, blah, blah advisor, and he's thinking in the back of his mind, but I want to do CEOs, then if we don't make him feel heard and he doesn't get the opportunity to share that pivot with us, then he won't buy. He's not going to say yes. He's going to say, I don't know, there's something else that's unresolved. I wish someone would have really heard me. And so when you diagnose and you leave space before you start just hitting them over the head with a sales pitch and features and benefit dumping, you have the opportunity, they have the opportunity to speak up and share with you something different, something new, something that they haven't discussed yet. And so when they have problems and we ask about them and we confirm them and we get all the data, and then we say, got it. So this is the problem and we know how to solve that, because instead of doing this, we would do something else, or we do that, or blah, 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 whatever extent you want to go into the sort of diagnosis or the treatment plan, right? You're not going to give them the full prescription. You're not going to write it out for them and tell them to go take the 2 of these and call you in the morning. You're going to tell them, yeah, well, typically we would treat that with this. Usually we do antibiotics. Yeah, usually, just rest it, stay off of it. You might want to wrap it as well if you're doing anything athletic or, putting any weight on it. Yep, you might, 6 months of physical therapy. We don't tell you exactly what the 6 months of physical therapy is going to entail. That's what you have to say. Yeah, okay, physical therapy sounds good. All right, well, here's what it looks like. Here's the first 2 months. Here's this. You're probably working with a knee specialist. They're going to have you doing these types of exercises. And, you're going to do that 3 times a week. And it's covered by your insurance. So the diagnosis is that inflection point or pivot point where we either go back into discovery or we go into prescription. And it's this thing that very few of you are doing. And those of you who have or are closing 25, 30% of your sales calls, you're doing this whether you know it or not. You're telling them what your expert opinion and diagnosis is. And they're either agreeing or disagreeing with you, and then you take it from there. So this is a very important point. And the longer that you stay in sales, the longer that you stay on your offer, the earlier you'll do this. And the more concisely and precisely you'll do this as well. And it's very fun. It's very fun. This is the only shortcut to the discovery process. And you can't really ever shortchange or shortcut asking questions, but you just ask fewer questions because you just have seen these situations before. You've just seen this movie before. You know how it's going to end. So that's diagnosing in a nutshell. There's a fine example. Again, I give this 5 stars because he's just so eloquent. He's so good at it. It's so easy. It's so fun. It's so fluid because he does it every single day in his own business, and he does it with his coaching clients, and he does it here on the sales call. So that's diagnosing. Next, we'll get into the actual selling of an offer, and I have got a doozy for you. The next one will be a little bit longer of a module. It's a very verbose and, again, eloquent pitch and presentation. It's actually from the same business, but it's from one of the salespeople on the team that I work with. So we'll get into prescription next. And remember, folks, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. I'll see you in the next one.